CBSE Board, Class 11, History, Chapter 2, Part 33, Audio by Renee Matthew. We have come to the last theme of this chapter, Theme 5, Nomadic Empires. This section of the chapter deals with a specific group of people, which looks very interesting, strong and very important group of people. We have to first look at an overview of the whole section. It's a very lengthy section, but very interesting also at the same time. What you're going to deal with in this particular section is given as an overview. What is the name of this particular section? Nomadic empires. Nomadic empires, the term itself appears contradictory. You know why? Because nomads are arguably, you can argue telling that they are wanderers, quintessential wanderers. They are the perfect examples of wanderers. They keep on moving from place to place. They are organized in family assemblies and they always move in groups along with their animals, and they have got undifferentiated economic life. It is not very stable always. And they don't have time to actually have more or go for more. They're always left with basic systems of political organization. It is nothing to do with extra. It is just the basic things that they have. Now that is the meaning of the word nomad. The term empire, on the other hand, carries a lot of sense. It is of a material location. So you may ask, how can nomads have empire? Because they are moving from one place to another. But they do have a sense of material location. And that is a stability which is derived from these kind of complex economic and social systems. So they don't have a fixed state of social and economic system which is followed by the nomads, okay? But they do have complex. Their social and economic system is not like any other country. It is very complex. So from this complexity, they derived the sense of location. That is the meaning of this statement. And their government is very extensive. It has got a territorial dominion also. It is so elaborate. The administrative system and the governance is really elaborate. It's extended. But there are a lot of contradictions, like when I tell you that the administrative section is extended, when I tell you that the government system is extended, you may ask, they are still nomads. How can they have all these systems? Right? So, there's a lot of contradiction on which these definitions are given. It may not appear historical also sometimes. It will be difficult for historic people to even conceive it, to actually understand it, okay? And sometimes when you study the root of these people, the economic and social development of these people, they tend to collapse. It doesn't have a parallel kind of understanding. We can get to know of a lot of imperial formations which is constructed by nomadic groups. So nomads were also interested in annexing, colonizing, having imperialism, all these things. So maybe you are having a lot of questions in your mind when I'm giving all these points. Let's go further. Now in this particular section, that is theme 4, we are going to actually deal with, like just now when we studied Islamic part, the Arabian Peninsula, we saw that they also had Bedouin nomadic traditions. They moved from one place to another in search of oases, in search of pastures and all that. Now, this particular chapter is going to give us an insight of a different kind of nomads. And they are the Mongols of Central Asia. They are people who move from one place to another, but still they established their own transcontinental empire. And that was established under the leadership of Genghis Khan. Okay? And it was a long stretch of empire straddling Europe and Asia during the 13th and 14th centuries. They were agriculture-based people. They had imperial connections in China, and the neighboring nomads of Mongolia, people who are neighboring to this particular empire, might have got a humbler, less complex social and economic world. We don't know. Okay, so they must have had a less complex thing. So initially when they were nomads, everything was actually less complex. So Central Asian nomadic societies were not insulated islands, and which were actually impervious to historical change. They were not islands as such, which was prone to historical change. These societies interacted, had an impact, and learned from the larger world. They were not actually closed or insulated from change. There were people who connected, who traded, who had commerce, who had a lot of collaboration. They were not away from historical change. That is the meaning of it. Okay, so that is the short introduction on this Mongols from Central Asia. What is the chapter going to deal with? The chapter is going to deal with the manner in which the Mongols, especially under Genghis Khan, adopted their traditional social political customs, how they adapted. Maybe the ruler was really strict, but how the people adapted to form a complex but still steady social and political system. And that created a fearsome military machine, sophisticated government. The military was really complex. So there was a great challenge in ruling this particular mixture of people. Melange means mixture. The people were really intercultural. A lot of variety can be seen. So to bring them under one economy, confessional systems, all these things, it was not very easy. And they also started annexing a lot of places. And when they annex the places, they have to give their economic and social system there also, right? They have to bring the annexed places also under their rule. And that is not easy because the annexed territories will have a different culture. So to bring and impose everything, impose their steppe traditions, their tradition is known as steppe, over the recently annexed territories was not very easy. They always were prone to innovations, they compromised, they created a nomadic empire because they came from elsewhere. It had a huge impact on the history of Eurasia because of their military and governing style. It also changed the character and also the constituency of the society forever. Everything was changed actually. The steppe dwellers, or this particular nomadic characters, they did not have or they did not produce much literature. So we are not able to get an access of their culture because usually when we learn about the Islamic world or French Revolution or any chapter for that matter, we have a lot of chronicles and travelogues which give us an insight of how they lived. But Mongols did not have much literature and we are not able to have an access to chronicles, travelogues and documents produced by the literatures. So less was there. So what we have now is based on the city-based people who wrote in the city. Maybe they have come for some other purpose and they were able to write about it. Not of the original nomads, but city-based people. So these authors, that is city-based authors, you may ask, is it okay to rely on the city-based authors because they never experienced the Mongol life? It is like partially correct to depend on them. They were really ignorant. The city-based people, you're correct, were ignorant. They were not aware of what is happening. And they always had biased reports of nomadic life. They always had their own opinions dominating over the reports. Maybe it is correct, maybe it's not correct. But it was always partial. Partial tone could be seen in their reporting. Now, the imperial success of the Mongols, we saw that Mongols really attracted, or it paved a great span of attention in especially Eurasia, right? But imperially, the Mongols were successful. They did not write any literature, but they attracted people who wrote. They attracted writers. They attracted literati because they produced travelogues from their experience. Many of them served Mongol masters. You should remember that they are always very powerful and dominating. So they had to serve travelogues. Everything was there. And these individuals came from variety of backgrounds, lot of backgrounds, and they came under the Mongol masters. Buddhist, Confucian, Christian, Turkish, Muslim. That is the interculture. That is why they were known as melange. So we are not very familiar with the Mongol customs. Many of them produce sympathetic accounts. It is like most of them will incite sympathy in us when we read it. Especially when they wrote about eulogies. Eulogies are writings which are made, inscriptions which are made when one person dies at the funeral. So this actually challenged and complicated the other hostile city-based tirade. Okay? Because these people, they did not have their own literature or anything, but their lifestyle made others write about them. So they were a great threat to the city-based people. And Mongols were known as steppe morodes. Morodes means people who loot, people who plunder. So they were scared of them. There are a lot of interesting details about the Mongols, and we have to question a lot of them also, in which sedentary societies usually characterize nomads as primitive barbarians. So even now we feel that people who move from one place to another are barbaric. They are not civilized. Sedentary means people who stay in one place for a long time, who settle down. So is that the real conception of Mongols? After reading this particular part, you will understand whether the Mongols were really barbaric in nature. Let us see how they were. Okay? There is a kind of research which was done on the Mongols. It was done by Russian scholars, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries, when the Tsarist regime consolidated and confirmed its control over Central Asia. Russians annexed Central Asia, and you should remember that Mongols were living here. So they wrote a research. They did a research. Now, what was the research on? This particular research or work was produced within a colonial milieu. That is, it was produced when people were facing colonization. And there were largely survey notes. It was a survey that was conducted, especially by travelers, soldiers, merchants, and antiquarian scholars. All these people started producing the survey notes. It was based on colonization which was written. So who wrote it? The Russians wrote. But in the early 20th century, after the extension of the Soviet Republic, Soviet Union was established and it started expanding over this particular region in Central Asia, there was a new Marxist historiography. And this new Marxist historiography argued that the mode of production which was persistent now determined the nature of social relation. The new system, the new historiography talked a lot about the social relation. So that was the finding. Okay? It was a historical event, a list of historical sequence that they were able to get a hold on. So that led to the study of the mode of production, how they lived and all that, especially social relations. And it happened after the extension of the Soviet Union. It actually placed Genghis Khan and the emerging Mongol Empire. Okay? It placed this person and the empire within a scale of human evolution. Humans were evolving. And they saw a transition, a transformation from a tribal to a feudal mode of production. They were no longer tribal. Maybe when they settled, they were tribals. But now they changed to feudal mode of production. They were not classless. They did not have any class. But They started developing, they evolved, and finally they had lord, owners of land, and peasants. So look at the transition. And that is how the empire was built. Initially they were nomads. They had the characteristics of nomads. But look at the transition, look at the way they transformed their life and they became a great empire. They had all this social ranking system. The transition was from tribal to feudal mode of production. And that is why we still remember the Mongol Empire, and it has a great place in the history of the world.